Another loss for Boston College, another embarrassing loss where nothing goes right and the Eagles lose 41-10.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for Boston College news and analysis, you're in the right place. We are right now at Alumni Stadium, where Boston College just finished up getting smoked by Clemson 41-10. This was an ugly game for BC. They let up 34 points in the first half, and we're not really close to winning this. We're going to go over what happened in that first half. Maybe some glimmers of hope a little bit later in the game and where things go from here. We'll dive into all of that on today's show. Now, I had said earlier this week when I had Mitchell Wolf on that we were thinking this game was not going to be close. I was correct. I did not think this was going to be a close game. And the biggest, there was issues all over the place with this team, but the biggest issue I saw was the defense in that first half. The defense could not make any stops. I saw at least one person out there from the Clemson land saying basically they could choose their own touchdown, the way they want to score their touchdown. They had Peter Woods, their defensive tackle, score a touchdown. Cade Klubnik moved all around in, hitting Antonio Williams and TJ, their other wide receiver, and Brian Wesco. They were just hitting everybody. And it was like as smooth as you could expect. I don't know how BC, was going to ever stop them. You had no pressure on Klubnik for most of the game. You were struggling to get them off the field, and it was just touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. They started the game off. They held them to a field goal. You felt pretty good about that. But the defense itself, it's just not good enough. Now, if you bring up the statistics, it's going to not look as bad because the end of the third quarter, they caused 3 turnovers, which was crazy. But the game was already out of hand at that point. And then you had questionable play calls that really kind of put this team in a tough spot. I'm not going to rag too hard on O'Brien for going for it on fourth down. I think they were on like their own 40-yard line right before half, because at that point the game was already over. That's how bad this game was going. So, I look at this game as a microcosm of everything that's going on with this program right now. You don't have the talent on defense. You have younger guys that are learning, and they're learning trial by fire right now. Guys like, Ashton Cunningham, and you saw Marion Davis out there, and TJ Green. At one point, they had 3 freshmen on the defensive backfield right there. That's against Clemson and those wide receivers. That's a recipe for disaster. And so that piece, it's hard to rip on them so hard for, because you're losing Syer Torrance, you're losing Amari Jackson. Max Tucker looked like at last game he was playing with one arm. He had an interception in this game, but you don't have a lot of talent on that back half. And in the front end, you're not getting any sustained pressures to make sacks. I think the one piece I would say that seems to be clicking from week to week to week is that this defense does not make plays. It does not make a play to get them off the field. You saw it a little against Cal. They did make a couple plays there. But last week against Pitt, this week against Clemson, against Stanford, it didn't make the plays that you need to make to end these drives. Constantly, especially with the first half, Clemson would, it would be third. Every time they would get the ball, it would be, a little small play, and then it'd be third down and short. And you just knew BC wasn't going to be able to stop them. It happened over, anytime BC had fourth and short against Clemson, or third and short against Clemson, A, you knew they weren't going to stop them. And B, if they did stop them, they were just going to go for it on fourth down, and you weren't going to stop them twice. So it was a big-time issue for BC here. It was great to see Quintavious Hutchins back. He had a few plays where he looked like, he was going to add something to this defense. But, talk about a game that just felt flat. I'm sitting up here in the press box. I'll be frank with you. By the third quarter, I was kind of glazing over, because it was It was painful to watch. The team did not have much life. And, let's get into the offense too, because the offense wasn't all that great. I'm worried about Dylan Lonergan. And there's a few things about what I'm worried about with him and his development that I think we should talk about. First, those first couple games, he looked like BC found this lightning in a bottle. They're going to have this future quarterback that's going to really light things up for BC. And it has really fallen off a cliff to the point where you're watching him and going, is he really going to be the right quarterback? Now, the big piece, I think, when you're talking about how Lonergan looks out there is the play of the offensive line. The offensive line, we knew this was going to be a problem for them in this game. You were going against Peter Woods. You were going against TJ Parker. You had a lot of talent on that Clemson defensive line. It was going to be tough sledding for them. And boy, was it tough sledding, because Lonergan, there was a sack, I think it was the third quarter, where Clemson's football team even tweeted it, that it was basically the entire defensive line and a few linebackers sacking Dylan Lonergan. No one was blocked. They all just jumped in and sacked him. And it was shortly after that we saw Shaker Isaac come in. So I still have faith that they can figure out what to do with Dylan Lonergan. I feel like, you expect with a young quarterback there's going to be bumps. This or Pitt was the biggest bump. I mean, you combine these two games and everything looks disgusting. Because, Lonergan I don't think he's thrown a touchdown in the last two games. Because you had one by Turbo today, and you had one Turbo. Was it Turbo? Oh, no, it was Chudzinski last game in garbage time. That's it. Lonergan has not thrown a touchdown pass in a couple weeks now. That's not good. And I do think some of that has to do with the offensive line. But he seems like he's getting a little more skittish back there. You're seeing more passes knocked down. He doesn't look as confident. And who can blame him? I mean, everything going on around him, it's chaos at this point. So I look at what Lonergan is dealing with. I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm not there with Shaker Isaac yet, as you need to switch yet. I mean, the season's lost. You've got 5 losses. You can only afford one more, and then you're out of bowl eligibility. We're talking about, just ending the season with a little bit of respect. But you also need to build towards next year. And I'm not sure what the answer is with that. You need to get Lonergan his reps. But if the offensive line is going to get him killed, we don't need another Emmett Moorhead situation where he gets skittish because – or Phil Jakovic that one year where he got killed. We don't need that to happen to Lonergan. But if the coaching staff thinks they can block for him, they think things can get okay, then leave him out there and let him try to figure things out. Like next week you have UConn. Maybe he can figure things out against the Huskies. But I'm already having flashbacks to, 2022 when BC lost to the UConn. Things could get real ugly with that. We'll talk about that in our last segment. So with Lonergan, I say this again. I picked BC to lose this game 38-10. They lost 41-10. I wasn't that far off. Some people in our comments were ripping me for this. Like, what kind of prediction is this? And I was saying, this is what I think. And I've been wrong on a few things. I wasn't wrong on that one. But I thought that just BC matched up very poorly against Clemson, and I was right on that. Like, I just felt defensively they didn't have the answers. They did not. Offensively, I didn't think they could go against that defense. They could not. This was just a bad game. It was, you got beat by a better team and one you expected to, at the beginning of the season, I thought BC was going to lose to Clemson, but I also thought Clemson was going to be coming in at like 4-0 or 4-1 or something like that. And they were 2-3. So this was different because you were like, oh, maybe they're not as good as you thought. Well, they are as good as you thought because you saw what they could do to your defense. So in a moment, I want to get into some thoughts about, what's going on with this program, what is happening, where things go. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. It's the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streak, saving more on every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Clemson, Cade Klubnik delivered in a big way. Against the Eagles, he was unstoppable until that third quarter. And when the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation or no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Cade Klubnik is on a streak. And just like Cade Klubnik delivered for the Clemson Tigers, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. All right, we are back here. Actually, let me hit this button so I know where to clip it. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every day, and I'm glad you guys are here with me as I sit in the press box after a 41-10 loss for Boston College. And one of the more interesting moves in this game had to do with Shaker Rising coming in halfway through the third quarter. Now, Mitch Wolf was texting me during the game, and apparently Bill O'Brien said on the telecast, if you were listening at home, that he put him in because Lonergan was getting killed by the offensive line, which was true, and he needed someone a little bit more mobile. Now, we saw for a while that mobility. But I'm not there yet with thinking that you need to put Shaker in yet. I remind you, he missed all of summer camp. He missed all of summer practice because he had his foot in a boot. And he's made some nice throws here and there, and he's mobile. That definitely, you could see he was more mobile than Lonergan. But I'm not sure if throwing him out there is the best answer. Now, people have been asking me, like, why is he out there and not Grayson James? Well, you need Grayson James. I'm going to say this right here. Your defense was killing Dylan Lonergan out there. He was getting sacked. He was, landing on his shoulder a few times. It wasn't good. If he goes down, you need Grayson James. So in a game like this where things aren't going well, it's already a foregone conclusion. You need to make sure that James stays healthy so that in case something happens later, you can start him. Now, if you look at the depth chart, Shaker Rising is number 2. So that's an interesting conundrum for them. But I still think, like, right now, it should go, if you're going to if something were to happen to Lonergan or you make a change, you got to go to Grayson James. I just think this game was so out of hand already. And you just knew that BC wasn't going to come back in this one. So going to Grayson James wouldn't have made as much sense, because if you lose him, then if something happens, you're in a tougher spot. For Shaker, I think a lot of folks fell in love with him after that one touchdown. And I caution you, it was against Pitt when the game was completely out of hand. That really shouldn't be read into all that much. He does do a few nice things. His sidearm thing that he keeps doing is kind of weird, but there's something there. I will say that. But that's an interesting thought too. Now, I go back to the purpose of this episode is not to dive into this game because there is really not much to talk about. BC's defense got smoked. The offense couldn't keep up, and that's it. I'm not going to talk about it for 30 minutes. What I will talk about though is what's happening here. I'm going to go on record right now that I am very worried that BC is not going to win another game this year. I don't think the team has quit. The defense definitely looked like they were still fighting through the end of this game. Credit to them. I need to make sure that's out there, that the defense looked pitiful for the first half, but that right where the interceptions that we saw from KP Price and Max Tucker, and then the muff punt, they held Clemson scoreless up until that last touchdown with like 30 seconds left. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but they showed some life. That being said, I'm saying this. I'm worried that this team is not going to win another game, and that includes UConn. Because UConn is not a bad team. They're not. As much as I would love to say that they're a bad team, there's a very good chance next week that if BC plays like they have been, UConn is going to be able to score touchdowns and BC will not. And if you lose to UConn, then the wheels could come off of the season very fast. They're not off. I mean, they're close to being off now, but losing to a UConn, as we saw in 2022, that really changes the complexion of a season and puts it in a whole other level of bad. So I look at that game, and I keep saying this. We're at the point where every game is a must-win game. UConn's a must-win game. Like legitimately for this program. Like you have to win this game because you're looking down the barrel of a season that could end up being worse than 2015 when it was one of the worst football seasons I've ever seen in my life. That season was horrible because you had nothing on offense. You had a great defense, but you had nothing on offense. This season could be worse than that because realistically, your defense is miles worse than 2015 because you had playmakers and you have Harold Landry, Justin Simmons, who was here today. He could tell you about being on a bad team. And a few other guys, right? John Johnson, I think, was on that team. Like you had NFL guys on that team. You had Don Brown coaching it, but your offense was all-time inept. This time, the frustrating part is you look at the offense and you've got some weapons. Like Turbo looks great at times. Reed Harris was completely invisible in this game. I don't know. I had to watch the film to see what happened. Lewis Bond had some catches, but like you have a few weapons there that you should be able to do a few things here and there. You're not. And then your defense is really, really bad. Like they're just not making any plays. They're not being able to stop anybody. And that's going to cause things to be a problem. So you play UConn, who was a bowl team last year, and I'd have to look up their record right now, but I think they're pretty good. If you don't beat them, where's the wins going to come? They're 4-2 right now. I don't see it. Syracuse could probably just run the ball on you and be able to stop you. And you have to do it on the road, which you showed that you can't do. You're not going to beat Georgia Tech. You're not going to beat SMU, which I was hoping they would be able to do. You're not beating Notre Dame. What we just saw tonight is going to happen again. It makes this feel like this season is really close to coming off the rails. And that's depressing. The thought when you brought in Bill O'Brien, after last season was, you went 7-6. That was typical to what you had with Jeff Hafley. You thought that was going to you could build on that, but you have taken such a step back. You've gone backwards so hard that you've actually not only gone from a team that is getting clobbered again to potentially having a season that's going to rival something we saw with Hafley or Dazio or Frank Spaziani. This is not what we were expecting to happen here. And this is what's so disappointing. And, we can finger point, we can point to what's going on and who's failing and who's not doing anything right. It's a whole systemic thing right now from the coaches on down. He's taking all the blame for it. So he should be able to take some of those jabs on this, but it goes from development to guys getting hurt. So you can talk about strength and conditioning to really bombing in the transfer portal because you didn't get really anything that's of any substance right now. You got developmental guys, but no one that can really help you, to questionable play calling, to problems with the list, it's just like boom, 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 boom. And it all just leads to bad football. And that's where we're at right now. We just saw our second straight week of really, really bad football. And I think this is tough for the fan base. It's really funny that Boston College just released this week their plans for luxury boxes. Yeah, you can also pay $6,000 for a suite yourself for tickets so that you can watch this awful football. You can do that too if you want to. You got to be able to start paying, but hopefully, I said this before. If that money goes into spending more, then all the power to them. Do it. If that's what's going to get them to spend more money on NIL and things like that, great. If it's not and it's just going into a general athletics fund, we're just spinning in a hamster wheel again. So, this loss, as I said earlier this week, shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. We've watched BC struggle with bad teams. Cal just got smoked by somebody, and Michigan State just got clobbered by UCLA, who fired their head coach. So nothing looks great. Nothing looks good. I wish I could be something positive here. I don't know, looking at this season, where things could go that could make things positive. I would say you need to start playing, let's trial by fire some more guys out there. Offensive line, for instance. your offensive line was bad today, especially against the pass rush. Why are we continuing to do the same offensive line that they've done in other games where they've been bad? You had one game where you were able to really consistently run the football, and we've seen that offensive line combo once. Why not do it again? What does it hurt to play Robert Smith? Why does it hurt to sit Kevin Klein and use him as a 6th offensive lineman? We heard from Bill O'Brien last week that he was going to change things. What changed? I mean, I haven't watched like the play calling to see if that changed, but just from a watching players on the field thing, I didn't see a whole lot of change out there. I saw the same offensive line. I saw they ran the ball more with Turbo Richards, so that counts as one. Omar Thornton got hurt. It seemed like everybody got hurt in this game. So we saw more of a Marion Davis out there. I guess that was a change, but I don't know if that was what he's planning on doing. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of change out there. It seemed like more of just the same. And honestly, for Bill, like, I don't know what you could change from, like, other than maybe some schematic things or playing some different players out there. But I didn't see a whole lot of that either. So that was tough to watch. That was tough to go for. In our final segment, I want to talk about the last, we have 6 more games left of this. All right. It's exhausting, but we'll get into it in just a moment. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. These are the moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward is Peter Woods, the defensive tackle for Clemson, who had the ball at the 1 yard line or 2 yard lines and dove in to really put the nail in the coffin for Boston College. I had to pick Peter Woods in this one because it really put the game forward and really put the game out of reach for Clemson. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like that, there's more to every highlight. There's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black here. If you're listening to this live on YouTube and you are not subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button. It does make a difference, and hit the like button so that other people can find this as well, so that you can hear more of my rants, hear more of my podcasts. Again, I do this directly after every game. I won't be doing it live directly after next week's game because I have something that popped up, but I will go live on Saturday at some point. But I wanted to just kind of wrap things up here. This is, again, beating a dead horse, but I just feel bad for the students, for the fans, and the players. Like, this program deserves more. Like, I feel like we're on a hamster wheel where things are just not getting better. And, the toughest part about all this was that there was excitement going into the season. I mean, I was at camp all summer long, and I heard, Max Tucker say they were hoping to win more than 7 games this year. That was a big hope for them. That's already gone. I heard players say that, they wanted to play for the ACC championship. That's not happening. Things are only going to get tougher from here. The rest of the season is going to get tougher. Holding on to your recruits could get tough. Getting new recruits is going to be tough. Getting transfers here is going to be tough. Keeping people here is going to be tough. This is not going to get easier for this program right now. This is the worst possible outcome for this season that you could think of. Not being competitive, losing all the time. BC cannot afford these types of seasons. And the hope with Bill O'Brien was that you would bring him in and you could minimize these kinds of results. But right now, the results speak for themselves. They are 1-5. They're going to battle to win anything this year. And I'm not sure where those wins are going to come from. For you folks out there, I love that you guys are still here listening to me talk, but maybe you're not going to come to any more games. I could see that happening. I get it. It happens. Like, you have only so many hours for free time. Why put it at why look at BC? Maybe you're a graduate. Maybe you want to see this stuff. Maybe you're hoping to see a change somewhere. I don't know. I watch these games myself too, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of positives right now. It just seems like everything is falling backwards. And at the end of the season, I have to say, this is going to be a very different offseason than last year. Last year, you felt like things were going to happen to just tweak things, to get things a little better. You had Grayson James coming back, but you brought in Dylan Lonergan. Maybe he will add to your quarterback room. Excuse me. You brought in some, FCS guys. I look at what Bill did in the portal last year, and we'll talk about this another time, and compared him to Jeff Hafley's groups, and I thought, this isn't going to work. They're going to have to make some systemic changes here. Which coaches you're going to retain, which coaches are not the fit that you thought they would be. Those are going to be conversations that are going to happen this fall and winter. And it'll be crazy. I mean, I'm expecting a very, very busy offseason, but we still have 6 more games left. 6 more of this. Will things get any better? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I was very disappointed with how things went today. Watching BC just trailing, defenders and wide receivers and not being able to tackle. It feels like the same thing every single week. It feels like Groundhog's Day, doesn't it? Well, I will be back on Monday. Mitch will be back with me. He will not be in Joker costume. I don't think he wants to put that makeup on ever again. But we'll be talking about this. He's got his thoughts on it. We'll dive into it. We'll talk about what we saw and his perspective from home. And we'll basketball's coming back. Hockey had a good weekend. We'll get some other things in there too, because I think we need a palate cleanser after things like this. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Check me out on Instagram, on Facebook, on Threads, everything, TikTok. I'll be available on all of those. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon for another episode of Locked On Boston College. Your team every day.